So this is Javier Arau with New York Jazz Academy, and I'm going to introduce you to a new infographic I've put together called All I Really Need to Know About Jazz I Learned from the Lick. And you were just hearing the lick to start with. I'm going to play it one more time, this time on the piano. And it seems like for some unknown reason this lick has entered the ether and a lot of people seem interested in it. I'm not much of an advocate for licks themselves, but I do think that if you can learn from how a lick is put together, great, because it can lead to all sorts of things. What I'm about to do with this lick, you can actually do with any lick. It just takes a little bit of creativity and analysis. So first of all, I want you to notice this little asterisk here. That means, it's not really all you really need to know. There's a lot more to this, but it's a start, and it's going to be kind of fun. So I should mention this infographic is available for download. If you just go to my website, javierarau.com, or to the NYJazzAcademy.com lessons blog, you can find that under news and resources, or just at the very top menu where it says blog. And feel free to download it. You can print it out, carry it around with you, put it up on your wall, whatever you want to do. So anyway, what I'm going to do is take you through the infographic to give you some insight. We're going to start right here on this arrow leading to melodic fragments. And the melodic fragment is referring to just these four notes at the beginning, D, E, F, G. So basically, as we go through this, I'm going to be paraphrasing these paragraphs. So you want to go back and make sure you read through them. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Yeah. So really, melodic line is very often not created with a whole scale, but with just a few notes at a time. So instead of using an entire scale, here the lick is just using only 4 notes from the D Dorian Minor scale. And if that's new to you, that's all right. We're going to skip some of this, but it's not too hard to figure out. So basically, the D Dorian Minor scale we address over here, and it's right here. So let me zoom in on that guy. D Dorian goes, there's the D minor chord. Dorian is always minor. And it's formed based on C major. So it's your C major scale, right here, just going. That's the scale in the chord, except it's just starting on D. So you can see the little arrow here coming down. Page is getting a little messy. Let me erase some of this stuff. Okay, so D Dorian Minor, it's the same exact notes as the C major scale, except starting on D. And let's go back to where we were. So you can use actually any portion of the D Dorian Minor scale to make little fragments. So you can use just the first 3 notes, or first 4 notes, or first the second, third, and fourth note, or you can use the top half of the scale. So the next thing I want to point out is form and architecture. This isn't something we think about necessarily on the small scale. Usually form we think of as the entire composition, like an AABA form on a 32-bar standard, or on a pop tune, like an intro, a verse, chorus, verse 2, right here. But actually, form really gives any phrase its inherent shape, its architecture. So what we want to do is always look at a piece and examine what's going on with the first part, the second part, the third part. A beginning, middle, and end is very common in a phrase. And really, as you go through this infographic, you're going to get to know each part of the phrase. But some details I think that are significant. Starts on D, it ends on D. It peaks up and then drops back down. At the very bottom it curls around and then lands on D. That may seem insignificant. It's not. You run the risk, if you're not thinking of form, of having a phrase that really is totally nebulous, and you don't want that. So moving on. Chord extensions. So a chord extension is fascinating because the chord symbol written here is D minor 7, which would be the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of, wait, that's messy. The 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the D Dorian minor scale. So as someone is playing the lick, perhaps someone else is playing the chord. The thing is, you don't just have to play the D minor with the first extension, the 7th. You could also play D minor 9, or D minor 11, or D minor 13. Any of those are totally fine to add. In fact, the lick itself starts out by outlining part of the D minor triad. And actually at the end it also outlines the 7th and then the root again. But right here in the middle, smack in the middle, it lands on E. And E is the 2nd, also known as the 9th. You can call it the 2nd or the 9th, it really doesn't matter. And basically that sound, it's a little bit crunchy, but it's beautiful. If I extended the chord underneath, maybe even more. That was the 9th, this is the 11th, the 13th. It's a great sound, each one is a little different. And your creativity really matters here. So you choose which one you like. Just know that it's all fine to use any of them. Harmonic substitutions, let's go here next. So that's referring to this little bracket, specifically this G, this E, and this C. Because if you look at the beginning, the first 3 notes, D, E, and F, boom, 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 those are part of the D minor scale, and they kind of imply D minor. The next 3 notes, though, this G, E, and C, imply an entirely new chord. You can already tell just by hearing it. It's the C major chord, the C major triad. So the fact that in the middle of this there's this other harmony is really a type of chord substitution. I like to call it a superimposition because you're playing it over the initial chord. But you know, it is definitely a derivative of a substitution, and jazz loves substitutions. They're used all over the place. One thing that's great about this little usage of C major here is there's a melodic shift halfway through the lick. So it feels like, yes, you're in D minor, but then you're in C major for a second. Now I changed the chord to go with it. Let's try it with the chord underneath again. Well, we could take the chord out and just play a D. And you can still hear this subtle shift where at the beginning it's all very, very easy. It matches the chord perfectly. And then there's some heightened tension in the middle, and then at the end is this nice release. So this idea of tension and release is such a big deal in jazz. It's used all the time, both among rhythm section players and among soloists. So let's move on to targets and enclosures. You really want to get to know targets and enclosures as a jazz musician. They're a lot of fun, and I think that they can really help focus your line and develop your idea. So there's a concept of a target note, and in this lick, by far the clearest, most obvious, to me, most significant target note is the very, very last one right here. So let's look at it. Let's see what's going on. It's the very end of the phrase, and it's a return to the root note from where the melody began. So again, we started on D, we end on D. Now, the way that you arrive at this target is fascinating. The arrival actually is traced through this line. It starts up on the E, and the E is actually approaching it from above. And then the C that comes next is approaching it from below. They have one up and one down, and they both hit a target at the end. So that's called an enclosure. In this case, it's a diatonic enclosure because it's only using notes from the original mode, the parent of the whole piece, which is D minor, the Dorian Minor scale. You can also find enclosures that are made of chromatic notes. So a fancy enclosure, instead of being E, C, D, might be, this one's a little nuts, but you could go E, and then E flat, and then C sharp, and then E. Then D, I mean, so that's quite a few notes in there. There's one that's even longer, which starts on C and goes C, C sharp, E, E flat, D. Both of those are great. That's sort of not basic at all, but a lot of fun. We addressed modal harmony already, so let's move from here down to the second half of what I'm talking about in modal harmony. So this is significant. There's this idea that you can play one chord, and that can be your chord for the piece. In this case, D Dorian minor is the key, really, for the lick right here. And so I'm going to call that the root or tonic harmony. The thing is, when you're dealing with modal harmony, the D minor 7 can also function as a chord that then moves to other harmonies. And that means there's a different parent key. And D Dorian is basically a relative of that parent key. So a really, really common chord progression, you've heard of the 2-5-1. Maybe you've already used it a ton. 2-5-1 is very, very common in jazz. And really what's happening if we make D minor the 2 chord, the parent key becomes C major. So that makes sense because C major is where D Dorian minor originally came from. But the point is, D Dorian doesn't have to belong to C major. It can belong on its own. So a piece can be in D minor, or it can also be related to C major. So the 2-5-1 is going to go D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Let's hear that again. I can do anything on the C major 7, really. The first one was a major 7. The last one was just a triad. That's D, G, and then at the end I did a C6 that time. C, E, G, A. I consider a lot of those interchangeable usually. Okay, there's one more that's called rhythmic syncopation. So let's take a look. Rhythmic syncopation. This is, I love rhythm in music itself. Basically, what we're dealing with is this concept that without syncopation, we only have downbeats. So a downbeat arrival with no syncopation would be. But if you syncopate a rhythm, then really what you're doing is instead of targeting a downbeat arrival, you're targeting an upbeat. So a syncopated upbeat forms the Charleston rhythm when you play a dotted half note, basically 1.5 beats plus the and. So instead of 1, 2, 3, it becomes 1, 2, and. Listen to that in context. I'll put a full D minor chord on that. If I don't syncopate it, just downbeat arrivals. Here we go. I think you can hear the difference. So sometimes there's an accent that's placed on the and of 2 there. It also doesn't have to be the and of 2. This is called the Charleston rhythm, and in the lick borrows from the Charleston and places a syncopation on the very, very last note. So instead of 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1, that would be E is a quarter, C is a quarter, and then D is a whole note. Instead, it's syncopated. So the note that's on the end of 4 is that D. So it goes like this. It's got a really nice flavor to it, and it's very danceable. A lot of these rhythms in music naturally came from dance. So it moves the beat to an upbeat instead of the preceding upbeat. Instead of on the strong beat on beat 1 or beat 3, it's moved just back half a quarter note, just back 1/8 note. Let's take a look at the bottom here. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. Okay, so we're looking at variations on the lick down at the bottom. And the first variation is with grace notes. You might have heard this one a lot. It goes like this. By the way, there's a question of, is the lick swung? Is the lick straight, like played with straight eighths? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's totally, in terms of context, and honestly, I don't really want to hear people playing the lick anyway. I just want them to learn from it and then really play something that is more inspired. So with these ideas, basically you're going to take a lot of this and begin to discover for yourself what you really want to create. And it's going to go well beyond the lick if you give it time and effort. So, and you have to be a little fearless with it too. But basically with grace notes, you can try one or both of these figures. The first one is a chromatic approach note. It sounds like this. The next one is an upper neighbor turn. So after I play, I kind of put a little turn in there. Now, if I just play one, to me that sounds a little smooth jazzy. I don't know if the moment calls for it, then I guess, you know, bring out your smooth jazz and play it. Another one at the end, the turn is going to sound like this. So I think they're both nice additions to the lick. The next one is called added chord tone, and it sounds like this. It's very subtle. Sometimes that note at the bottom is ghosted. You can barely hear it. Notice I also sped up the tempo. This lick is usually played a little bit faster, but really you can play these at any speed. And you can hear, because you're adding in one note, this fifth, the A, on the end of 4, now the D can't be played there. In the original, the D was played, of course, right here on the end of 4. Now it's not. Now it's played smack on measure 2 on a downbeat. Next one, we only have 2 more, and then we're done. Next one is called added pickup note. It's right here at the very beginning. It's pretty simple. And it adds a little bit of rhythmic interest. It also doesn't displace any other note in the whole thing. So it's effectively just tacking on one note before you play the whole thing. You could also combine this with a turn, like... That's a good way to do it. One more. Transposition and rhythmic variation. I call this the Santana Lick. It's straight out of his Oye Como Va moñas or riffs. So you have to really get strong at transposing, especially if you want to play jazz. So if we play this line, we're now in C minor. I just moved the whole line down. I could have played it in D minor. Could play it in A minor, of course. What does it take to transpose? Basically, you just have to get a feel for what the Dorian minor is in the new key. So in this case, C minor 7 is the Dorian minor, and it's based on B flat major. Better yet, listen to it a lot and allow your ear to grow to the point where you can hear some of this stuff and get right to it and play it. So to gain fluency in other keys, it's not about gaining fluency in the lick. I don't know what you would do if you got fluent with the lick. I guess you could play it a lot, but who cares? No one really wants to hear the lick anymore. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe your goal is to play the lick like crazy. If that's the case, go with your heart. But to me, the best thing to do is build off of the lick so that you're learning how to really tap into your own improvisations, with improvising being the key word. So you got to gain fluency in other keys. I would recommend certainly a goal being all 12 keys. I say that because we're in minor, and I don't count the enharmonic spellings as being other keys. So if you've watched this far and you're wondering about 30 keys, I'm just going to say 12 keys, and implicit in that are major and minor. I mean, if you really want to get down to it, we could call every single mode a different key, and I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. So what I'm talking about when I say all 12 keys is I'm saying minor, specifically in this case Dorian minor, because we're treating the Dorian minors, the C minor 7, the D minor 7, any of them, the C sharp minor 7, it doesn't matter, as a key unto itself. So in this case, we've only learned D minor and C minor, so you've got 10 more keys to learn. It's not too hard. But if it feels overwhelming, don't start with all 12. Just start with, say, 3 and go from there. Better yet, start with 1. Learn 1, then add another one, and then another one. But each time you add a key, if you're not adding too much, it'll reinforce what you've already learned, and you'll learn the original key even better. So lastly, this added syncopation displaces the target resolution. So, there's a lot of syncopation here. Right away, this quarter note at the beginning and then a repetition of the root displaces everything, and then we're throwing in these rests here. By the time we're done, this final target is displaced a beat and a half. It was originally on the end of 4, it moved through 1, through the end of 1, and is arriving actually all the way on 2. Let's listen carefully. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, 4. Whew, it's hard to say and play. But that's it. So, again, I hope you had a good time with this. I had a really fun time putting it together.